Irene. Yeah, Dorothy.
Um, from my understanding, when you speak of Jesus, because I was raised Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
my whole
Yeah.
family and everything, but I've loved when you've quoted Jesus, but I look at it, you've quoted the historic Jesus, the man who actually walked on this earth, just like I hold him up there with Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Robert Kennedy. These are Cesar Chavez. These are all heroes in my life that are, have tried to teach me how I want to live my life. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe there was a man that walked on this earth. His name was Jesus. Everything else that goes along with that, that we were taught as Catholics, you can either believe that or not, but
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't taken away from um, what the historic Jesus tried to teach us how to live. and
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what you have tried to uh, quote, the historic Jesus, the man who walked on this earth.
Yeah. 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 As best I can, um, and as best as we can know what the historic Jesus was about, which is very tricky. There's a book I've recommended before, but for Dorothy, for you or Irene or anyone who's interested in this, a really really good book is by Stephen Mitchell. That's Stephen with a PH. Stephen Mitchell, The Gospel According to Jesus.
I've read it.
Yeah, isn't it good?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
wonderful. Yes.
it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, be, and what because Mitchell knows what he's talking about
Mhm.
in this area, way better than I do, because he's a real scholar. He's a scholar of the ancient languages, Hebrew and Greek, and so he can read the the texts in their original. Actually, even to say read the text in the original form, there's copies. They're all copies of copies, and there's variants and
Hmm.
so forth. You know, that Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, was written without any vowels and
Wow.
without any spaces between words.
Hmm.
So it's just, I mean, here's just one little thing right there. Can you imagine if you had a whole book, and maybe it was
Scroll.
about someone who was an incredible teacher or did incredible things, but the whole book, let's say it was written in English, but all the vowels were left out, only consonants and no punctuation and no spaces between the
Oh,
letters.
wow.
Can you see even just that little thing? There's all different ways that things might be interpreted
Right.
even when we're trying our hardest to give an accurate historical representation to things. Okay, so there's all kinds of difficulties in reconstructing it, and Mitchell says that. You may remember this, Dorothy, in the introduction. He says that the thing he keeps hearing over and over, I think he says it's like the baseline is we don't know, we don't know, we don't know. Which sometimes even that's a very healthy thing to know that that's the thing Zen masters say. Sung San, the great Zen master, used to just say his whole slogan was "Only don't know, only don't know." Right? So,
Mhm.
right? Because the moment you go, "I know," your mind has like closed down on a thought, closed down on a concept, an idea. As long as you're in the state of not knowing, you're in a state of openness, right? But so Mitchell brings that scholar's approach, but also, Mitchell's a lifelong Dharma practitioner.
Oh.
And so, he's sat Zen, and he's actually, if any of you are familiar with Byron Katie, her teachings, he's actually married to her now. So so he brings in I mean, and you all know this by now, that there's certain things that only because you are a meditator, you've been living this stuff in your life, you'll recognize it. You'll recognize the the teaching. Oh, this is what this is about. You'll see a movie and you'll see all these people trying to get happiness and peace and fulfillment, and in all these different ways, and you know what they're all going for because it's your experience. So Mitchell brings that perspective as well.
Okay.
But yeah, to me, and one of the things he brings so well is taking the perspective of Dorothy, as you're saying, Jesus as a human being who was a great teacher, right? Now that's another perspective is where he's of divine origin. He's more like he comes down out of the clouds, and he's born conceived in a special supernatural way. And again, I'm not in a position to say that that's wrong or that's right. And some people are very inspired by that. That's great as far as I'm concerned. But for me, it inspires me more if he was just a guy. Because if you're coming down out of the clouds, that's too easy.
He was a guy, but he was very rebellious too. He was a rebellious guy.
Yeah. He was a okay. But Irene, I'm on the Dorothy and I are got the floor for a while. Okay. For instance, to me, this is one of the things that Mitchell says in his book that I found just really powerful. In the Bible, Jesus is often addressed as Son of Mary, right? Son of Mary. And we hear that, oh, Son of Mary, and it sounds so beautiful to us. It sounds so poetic, right? Mitchell makes the point that Jesus was he was living in the Jewish Middle Eastern culture, which was a patriarchal culture. Your entire status in the culture, your entire status in the community was based on your father, right? That would be your name would be like my dad was Harris Slater. So in that culture, I would be Dean Ben Harris, right? Dean, son of Harris. We have these names like Johnson and Robertson, which came about in the same way, right? So when people addressed Jesus, and by the way, his name was not Jesus. His name was Yeshua.
Right.
Yeshua. But
right.
Jesus is the Greekized version of it. Greek, a language which he probably didn't speak. So if you saw him in the street, if you went back in the time machine and called out, "Hey, Jesus," he wouldn't turn around. He would not recognize that name. But the thing that Mitchell points out is that when people said "Son of Mary," that was an insult. That was an insult. Essentially, that was saying, "Yeah, where's your daddy?" Essentially, it was the equivalent of saying Mary's little bastard.
Right.
Mary's little bastard, right? You're illegitimate. In that culture, if you were illegitimate, I know that's a word that's not politically correct anymore, which is a good thing. If you were, if you were born out of wedlock, you didn't have property rights. If they had a trial, if there was a whole legal proceeding and everything was done, everything was settled, and then someone found out, oh, but one of the witnesses who testified was born out of wedlock, that made the whole trial tainted, and it didn't apply anymore. Right? That's what like an untouchable you were. So that one little thing. See, this is the value of knowing what the hell you're talking about. The value of education, of scholarship. In the case of Mitchell, I never would have known this. That's what Son of Mary means. But then bringing in his deep psychological perspective, Mitchell says, so what does this tell us? He said, all the great teachers, Lao Tzu and Confucius and Socrates, they all talk about much the same thing, but each one has certain things they emphasize more. And the thing that Jesus really emphasizes is forgiveness. None of the other teachers talk as much about forgiveness as Jesus does. And Mitchell's theory, which I just find so inspiring, is it's because Jesus was brought up as an insulted, untouchable pariah, so he had a lot to forgive, right? And that as a, Dorothy, as you say, as a human being rather than a God, just taking this perspective for the moment, that he had to learn how to forgive or, go start shooting people, right? He that and that if we can see that as a spur to his spiritual quest. We've all had things that have happened to us that have spurred our spiritual quest, usually things that we would not have chosen, right? We would not have chosen for this sickness to happen, or in our family, or to ourselves, or for this death, or for this financial disaster, or whatever. But often it's the things that we would not choose that spur us to look deeper and to find out, is this little so-called self, this little bagged and tagged ego that suffers all these, slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, is that really what I am? Is that my deepest identity? Or is there a deeper level where I'm something that is, in immovable peace that's immune to all that? Right? So I find that much more inspiring because it's not just handed to him. Right? And so that's a thing I can relate to. To me, for me personally, that's a thing I can learn from more. That's a thing, okay, that's an example I can follow. And specifically the forgiveness thing. All right. How do you find when you have been treated so badly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I can certainly think of people in the world right now, people in politics, that you ask me to forgive them for what they've done. Very, very difficult. I have to go way down deep into my deepest, clearest perception that I and politician X are both that same, that same beingness to even. I had this conversation with Rupert Spira I think it was on the last retreat or on a webinar I was with him and so forth, and just talking about just finding myself, so angry at certain politicians that have done things that I think are horrible to this country that I love, and and he recommended that I do this thing. This is the thing Ram Dass was telling people 30 years ago. You take a picture of that politician, put him in a beautiful gold frame, put him up on your altar next to your favorite gurus and gods, and you burn the incense, and you recognize that same boundless beingness in that politician as in all your favorite gurus and gods, right? Put them next to Jesus or whoever you hold the highest. And I still haven't done it.